I want to tell you about the day I stopped being afraid of Claudette Morrison. Not because something brave happened to me. Not because I woke up one morning with some kind of righteous fire. The truth is less cinematic than that. The truth is that I had been quietly, methodically, almost obsessively preparing for that moment for 4 months before it arrived, and when it finally did, I wasn't afraid because I had already lived it 100 times in my head at 2 a.m. in the dark of my apartment, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Simone Tate. I am 36 years old. I am a senior project manager at a mid-sized marketing consultancy called Hartwell & Vance, and for 3 years I reported directly to Claudette Morrison, VP of Client Services, architect of my professional misery, and the most talented liar I have ever encountered in a workplace setting, which, if you have spent any time in corporate America, you understand is a genuinely competitive field. I want to describe Claudette to you because Claudette is the kind of person who requires description. She was 51, black, impeccably dressed in a way that signals not wealth exactly but precision. Everything chosen, nothing accidental. She had natural hair that she wore in different styles depending on her mood, which I had learned over time to read the way sailors read weather. Twists meant she was focused. Bun meant she was irritated. Wash and go meant she was feeling confident about something, which usually meant she was about to make someone else feel less so. She was smart. I want to make sure I say that, because the worst villains in your life are never stupid. Stupid people's damage is limited by their stupidity. Claudette was smart the way some predators are smart, efficiently, purposefully, with excellent instincts about weakness and opportunity. She had decided, somewhere in my second year at Hartwell & Vance, to make me her project. I still don't know exactly why. I have theories. I was good at my job in a way that was occasionally inconvenient to her. I had a relationship with one of the senior partners, Diane Hartwell herself, that predated Claudette's tenure, which I think she found threatening. I was direct in meetings in a way that some people read as confidence, and Claudette read as insubordination. I did not laugh at the right moments or defer at the right moments or perform the particular kind of strategic smallness that she seemed to need from the people who reported to her. Whatever the reason, the campaign was gradual and it was sophisticated, and by the time I understood what was happening, it had been happening for a long time. The mechanics of being undermined by a skilled operator are worth explaining because they are designed specifically to be hard to explain. That's the point. Every individual incident is deniable. Every moment of damage has a reasonable interpretation. Claudette never screamed at me. She never sent an email that could be screenshotted and forwarded. What she did was quieter and more effective than that. She forgot to include me in meetings I should have been in, then expressed mild surprise when I was unaware of decisions made in them. She relayed feedback from clients that I had no way of verifying, feedback that was always slightly damaging, always just vague enough to be impossible to dispute. She praised my work in one-on-one settings and described it as developing or inconsistent in group contexts so that the version of me she presented to leadership and the version I experienced privately were different people wearing the same name. She interrupted me in meetings. Not rudely, she was too smart for rude. She would begin speaking while I was in the middle of a sentence, not loudly, not aggressively, just continuing, as if what I had been saying had naturally concluded. And in the moment, in the flow of conversation, it was so smooth that sometimes I wondered if I was being too sensitive, if I was imagining it, if the problem was me. That is the real achievement of a skilled underminer, not the damage they do, the doubt they install. I started keeping a journal in month 4 of year 2. Just dates and incidents, written plainly, the way you'd write a field report. Not because I was planning anything. Just because I needed something outside my own head to tell me that what I was experiencing was real. The journal had 43 entries by March of last year. 43. The Grayfield account was the reason everything finally broke open. Grayfield Media was our largest client, a regional media group going through a rebrand, complicated and expensive and high visibility, the kind of account that partners actually paid attention to. I had been the project lead from the beginning. 14 months of strategy sessions and creative briefs and client calls and internal reviews. I knew that account the way you know a house you've lived in for years, which door sticks, which floorboard creaks, where the light comes in at the right angle in the afternoon. We were in the final stretch. The rebrand was rolling out in 6 weeks. The client was nervous in the way that clients always get nervous when the thing that has been abstract for over a year is suddenly about to be real. My job in that final stretch was to be the steady hand, to manage their anxiety, keep the internal teams aligned, and make sure the delivery didn't slip. I was doing that job. I was doing it well. I have emails, timestamps, client communications, internal Slack messages, and eventually a recording that prove this. In week 2 of March, Greyfield's brand director, a man named Peter Chow who was meticulous and occasionally anxious, and whom I had spent 14 months developing genuine professional trust with, flagged a concern about the typography system in the new brand guide. It was a valid concern. I discussed it with our creative director. We identified a solution. I communicated it to Peter. Peter approved it. I documented it and moved on. Standard project management. A thing that happens 100 times on a project like this. I was not in the room. I had a conflict with another client call when Claudette apparently brought this up in a leadership check-in that I had not been included in. I know what she said in that meeting because 3 people were in it, because one of them told another one what had been said, and because the version that came back to me, filtered through 2 conversations and a week of time, was that Claudette had told the partners that the typography issue had been mishandled, that I had been slow to respond, that the client had been frustrated by the communication gap, and that she had stepped in to stabilize the relationship. I want to take a breath here. Even now, telling this story, I feel the particular temperature of that anger. Not hot, not explosive, but very cold and very clear, the kind that doesn't dissipate, that just sits in you and waits. Peter Chow was not frustrated. Peter Chow had sent me an email that said, and I am paraphrasing minimally, "Thanks, Simone, as always you're on top of it. I feel good going into the final stretch." Claudette had not stepped in. Claudette had been CC'd on one email chain, which is the professional equivalent of being in the same zip code as something. She had stood in a room with the partners of my company and told them a story about me that was false. And I hadn't been there. I need to tell you about the phone. 4 months before that meeting, I had done something that I want to be careful about how I describe, because I want you to understand that I am not cavalier about the implications of it, and I did not do it impulsively, and I consulted with an attorney friend of mine, a woman named Kezia, who practiced employment law, and who I had met in a yoga class of all places, and who had become one of the people I trusted most. Before I did it, Kezia explained to me the recording consent laws in my state. We are a one-party consent state, which means that as long as I am a participant in a conversation, I am legally permitted to record it without informing the other parties. She explained this carefully. She also explained that I should be certain I was a participant, that there was a meaningful legal and ethical distinction between recording a conversation you are in and recording a conversation you are not in. I understood the distinction. What I did was this. I began quietly and consistently recording conversations. Not all of them. I wasn't trying to build a surveillance apparatus. I was trying to create a record of the specific interactions where I felt the reality of what was said, and what was later reported had the potential to diverge. Meetings with Claudette one-on-one. Client calls where Claudette was also on the line. Team check-ins where I felt, based on 43 journal entries of pattern recognition, that something might happen. I used a small app on my phone. I kept the recordings organized by date and context. I never told anyone I was doing it. I did not feel guilty about it. I had spent the better part of 2 years being told, in various ways, that what I had witnessed with my own ears had not happened, or had been different than I recalled, or was a matter of interpretation. I was building an archive of interpretation. I had 22 recordings by March. In week 3 of February, 3 weeks before the Greyfield situation, there had been a call. A routine call, or what I had thought was a routine call. Claudette, me, and Peter Chow, a mid-project check-in. We had discussed several things. We had discussed the typography system. I had been the one to identify the concern. Peter had been relaxed. Claudette had been present, but largely quiet. At the end of the call, Peter had said his exact words, "Because I have the recording, I feel really well supported by your team, Simone. You're good at this." I have the recording. Here is what happened when I found out what Claudette had said in that leadership meeting. I did not go to her office and confront her. I did not send an email. I did not tell anyone what I knew. I went home, I made tea, and I called Kezia. We talked for an hour. Kezia asked me what I wanted. Not what I wanted to do to Claudette, what I wanted for myself. She asked this because she had, over the course of our friendship, watched me spend too much energy thinking about Claudette and not enough thinking about Simone. I said I wanted it to stop. I said I wanted the record corrected. I said I wanted to do my job for the next 6 weeks and get Grayfield across the finish line and be seen clearly for the work I had actually done. Kezia said, "Okay. So this needs to happen in a room with the right people, and it needs to happen in a way that doesn't let her recover. One shot. You don't get two." She was right. I knew she was right. The impulse to act fast, to react, to storm into someone's office and demand an accounting, that impulse was about my feelings, which were valid but were not the point. The point was to win. And winning in a corporate setting is almost never about the loudest move. It's about the right move, made at the right time with the right people watching. I waited. I watched. I kept recording. The all-partner meeting was scheduled for the second week of March. It was a monthly touchpoint, all senior staff, both founding partners, quarterly updates on major accounts. I had presented at this meeting before. I was scheduled to present the Grayfield update, which made sense given that I was the project lead, and we were 6 weeks from delivery. 5 days before the meeting, Claudette sent me an email, copied to both partners, informing me that she would be taking point on the Grayfield update at the upcoming meeting, given the recent complexities on the account. She said she thought it would be beneficial for me to observe how senior leadership navigates client-facing narrative at this stage. She wanted me to sit in the room and watch her present my project. I read that email 4 times. Then I replied, cordially, that I understood and that I looked forward to the meeting. I called Kezia.
"She's going to do it again," I said.
In the meeting. In front of both partners. She's going to present my project and reshape the story of what happened. Yes, Kezia said. She is. What do I do? There was a pause. You go to the meeting. You let her start. And when the moment is right, you play the recording. I want to tell you about the 3 days between that conversation and the meeting. I was not calm.
I want to be honest about that.
Calm is something I perform professionally the way a lot of women learn to perform it, because panic has professional consequences that it doesn't seem to have for men, because being visibly upset is read as instability in ways that have nothing to do with the actual situation. I performed calm very well in those 3 days. I kept working. I answered emails. I took a call with Peter Chow on Wednesday about the delivery timeline, and I was focused and organized, and Peter ended the call by saying, unprompted, that Hartwell and Vance was the best agency relationship he'd had in 15 years. I noted that. I noted the time and date. Internally, I was doing what I always do when I am genuinely frightened about something. I prepared. I went through the recordings 17 times. I prepared 2 copies, one on my phone, one on my laptop. I thought through every possible way the moment could go wrong, and what I would do in each scenario. I thought about what I would say, and what I would not say, and how I would sit, and what expression I would have on my face. I thought about my mother. My mother was a woman who had survived things that make my corporate grievances look like a light inconvenience, and she had done it with a dignity that was not passive, dignity as a form of combat, dignity as the thing that meant they hadn't won. She always said, "Don't waste your energy on the anger. Use the energy for the action." I had been angry for 2 years. It was time for the action. The meeting room at Hartwell and Vance had a long oval table and a wall of windows that looked out over the city. I sat on the window side, which meant the light was behind me. That was not accidental. I had claimed that seat very deliberately when I arrived, 8 minutes early, while the room was still mostly empty. People filtered in. Diane Hartwell, one of the founding partners, mid-60s, tiny and warm and with a mind like a steel trap, sat near the head of the table. James Vance, the other founding partner, quieter and more analytical, sat across from her. Senior staff filled in around them. Claudette arrived last, a habit I had observed and which I believed was tactical. Arriving last gives you a red on where everyone already is. She saw me sitting in the window seat. Something passed across her face. Too fast to name, gone before anyone else would have caught it. She sat at the opposite end of the table. The meeting moved through its agenda. Other accounts, other updates, other small internal pieces of business. I watched Claudette. She was composed and professional, and made 2 small contributions to earlier agenda items that reminded people she was in the room, that she was engaged, that she was a senior presence at this table. She was warming up. When we got to Grayfield, Diane looked at me first, a reflex, I think, the muscle memory of 14 months of me being the one who reported on this account. Then Claudette spoke. I wanted to take us through the Grayfield status myself this month, she said, with the easy authority of someone who has never been challenged. We've had some turbulence recently, and I think it's important for leadership to hear the fuller picture. Diane nodded. James leaned slightly forward. Claudette began. And she was good. I want to give her that. She was measured and fluent, and presented a version of the last 3 weeks of Grayfield that was coherent and detailed, and almost entirely constructed. She described communication gaps with the client. She described escalations that had required her intervention. She described a project that had been wobbling and a senior leader, herself, who had studied it. She did not say my name disparagingly. She was too smart for that. She said my name the way you might say the name of a patient, gently, with a kind of careful neutrality that landed as concern. I watched Diane's face. I watched James's face. I watched the slight, specific recalibration happening behind their eyes, the way a story, told with confidence, begins to rewrite what people think they know. I had a choice. I could speak. I could say, that isn't accurate. I could offer my own account, my emails, my documentation. I could make it a he said, she said. I could make it a contest of credibility. Or I could do what I had prepared for. Claudette finished. She folded her hands. She looked at the partners with the expression of someone who had done something difficult and necessary. Diane said, "Thank you, Claudette. That's helpful context." And then she looked at me. "Simone, anything to add from your end?" There it was. I said, "Yes, I do have something." My voice was level. My hands were still. I reached into my bag, and I set my phone on the table. "I have a recording of the client call from February 24th, I said. The call where Claudette and I were both on the line with Peter Chow, discussing the typography concern. I'd like to play it because I think it might be relevant to some of what was just described." The room went very quiet. Not the quiet of discomfort. The quiet of attention. The specific, electric quiet of a room that understands something significant is about to happen. Claudette's face did something that I will remember for the rest of my life. It wasn't one thing. It was a sequence, recognition, assessment, the rapid mental arithmetic of someone calculating odds, followed by a composure that was genuinely impressive and also, in that moment, beside the point. She said, "I don't think that's..." "Claudette," Diane said. One word. Quiet as anything. Claudette stopped. I played the recording. It was 7 minutes and 40 seconds long. In the meeting room, those 7 minutes and 40 seconds had the quality of time that moves differently, the way a minute underwater feels longer than a minute in air. People stopped moving. Someone who had been about to refill their coffee cup set it down without pouring. Peter Chow's voice, slightly compressed by the phone line, describing his concerns about the typography system. My voice, asking specific questions, working through the issue in real time, proposing the solution that our creative director and I had already discussed. Claudette's voice, present, occasional, contributing nothing that moved the conversation forward. Peter saying, at the end, with the unself-conscious warmth of someone who didn't know they were being recorded, "I feel really well supported by your team, Simone. You're good at this." When it finished, I set the phone down. I did not say anything immediately. I had learned from watching people far more powerful than me operate in rooms like this one, that the person who speaks first after something significant usually loses. Diane looked at Claudette for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "How long have you been recording meetings?" she said. "Only meetings I am a participant in," I said. "And only for the past 4 months." I paused. I started doing it because I found that my recollection of what was said and the accounts that reached leadership sometimes differed. I wanted to ensure I had an accurate record. The accounts that reached leadership landed exactly the way I had intended it to. James Vance, who had said almost nothing during the meeting, said, "That's a measured response to a concerning situation." He was not talking about my recordings. I am going to condense what happened next because some of it involves people who are not me and who deserve some privacy, and some of it is the kind of slow institutional process that resists narrative compression. What happened in brief was this. The meeting ended. Diane asked Claudette and me to remain afterward, separately. She spoke with Claudette first for 22 minutes, while I waited in the small conference room adjacent to the main one, looking out a different window at a different piece of the city, very still. Then she spoke with me. She asked questions I had prepared for. She was direct and she was fair and she was, I think, genuinely troubled, not in a dramatic way, but in the way of someone who realized, incrementally, that something had been happening under her roof that she had not seen. She asked if I had other documentation. I said I had a journal, with 43 entries and 22 recordings. She asked if I was willing to share those with her and with HR. I said I was. She thanked me. She said the right things about the situation being taken seriously. She looked tired in a way that I recognized, the tiredness of someone who trusted the wrong person and is only now understanding. I went back to my desk. I sent Peter Chow a message confirming the delivery timeline. I closed my office door. And then, only then, in the privacy of my own space, I let myself feel it. Not triumph. Not vindication. Something quieter than either of those. Something closer to relief, or the aftermath of a very long-held breath finally released. The investigation took 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, I project managed the Grayfield rebrand to a delivery that was on time, under budget by 4%, and received by the client with a kind of genuine enthusiasm that makes all 14 months feel worth it. Peter Chow sent a formal letter of commendation to both partners. In that letter, he specifically mentioned my name 7 times. I counted. Claudette was placed on administrative leave in week 3 of the investigation. She resigned in week 5. The official statement was the standard one: pursuing new opportunities, gratitude for her contributions, best wishes. The unofficial reality, which I know because Diane told me herself in a conversation I will keep private except for this detail. The journal and the recordings revealed a pattern of conduct that went beyond my situation. 3 other people on the team had experienced similar things. None of them had recordings, but they had stories that, laid alongside mine, formed a shape that was impossible to misread. I was not the first. I was just the one who had documented it. After Claudette was gone, one of the women on my team, a project coordinator named Blythe, 28, brilliant, who had been quietly struggling for a year in ways that suddenly made a different kind of sense, came to my office and closed the door and stood there for a moment not quite meeting my eyes. Then she said, "How did you know to start recording?" And I told her the truth, which was that I hadn't known anything. I had just gotten to a point where I trusted my own experience more than I trusted the version of events being constructed around me. And once I trusted myself, I started documenting. And once I started documenting, I stopped being afraid, because fear lives in uncertainty, and I had replaced my uncertainty with evidence. She nodded slowly. She said, "I wish I'd known sooner that you were going through it too." I said, "That's the design. The isolation is the design." She came to work for my team eventually after some restructuring. She is excellent at her job. She documents everything. I want to tell you about what changed in me after all of this because the professional outcome is one story, but the internal one is a different story, and I think it's the more important one. I am still at Hartwell and Vance. I am now a VP, a title that came with the restructuring, a reflection of work I had been doing for years under a title that didn't match. I report directly to Diane. Our relationship is honest in a way it wasn't before, partly because Diane is a person capable of learning from what she missed, and partly because I am no longer performing a version of myself that is smaller than what I actually am. I still record meetings when I feel the situation warrants it. Not often. Not paranoid. Purposeful. I explain to anyone who asks that I do it for my own records, the same way some people take notes, and the people who find that threatening are, in my experience, the people who are planning to say one thing and report another. What I lost was the particular exhaustion of chronic self-doubt. The years of wondering if I was too sensitive, too paranoid, too ambitious, too much or too little in the ways that women are always being calibrated. The recording had done something unexpected. It hadn't just documented Claudette. It had documented me. My competence, my patience, my professionalism, my judgment. Every time I had pressed play in those months of preparation, I had heard myself, clearly undistorted, and I had seen that I was good at this. Not perfect. Good. Genuinely good. It sounds like a strange thing, needing a recording to believe in yourself. But I don't think it's strange. I think it's the consequence of spending years in an environment that systematically offers you a distorted mirror. You start to wonder which reflection is true. The answer, it turns out, is the one you made yourself. One last thing. About 3 months after everything resolved, I ran into Peter Chow at an industry conference. We had lunch. He was warm and funny and asked about the team. At some point I told him, carefully, without specifics, without anything that would make him feel uncomfortable, that there had been some internal challenges around the Greyfield project that I had had to navigate. He looked at me for a moment and then said, "You know, I always had this feeling, and I couldn't articulate it during the project, that you were working harder than you should have had to. Like there was something you were managing that wasn't on the project plan." I laughed because that was so precise it was almost funny. "Yeah," I said. "Something like that." He shook his head. "I'm sorry I didn't say something. I noticed, and I didn't say anything, and I should have." I thought about that for a while afterward. The people who see and don't speak. The people who sense something is wrong in a room and calibrate the cost of naming it and decide the cost is too high. I was not angry at Peter. I understood the calculation. I had made it myself for 2 years. But I thought, this is why you document. This is why you keep the record. Because the people who might have spoken for you often won't, and the people with the power to harm you are counting on that silence. So you have to be your own witness. You record it. All of it. The praise. The problems. The meetings where the truth is said out loud before someone has a chance to rewrite it. You keep it. You wait. You learn the difference between reacting and acting, between impulse and strategy, between a loud move that makes you feel better and a right move that actually changes things. And then, when the time comes, when you're sitting in a room and you've been patient and prepared, and you've had 43 journal entries and 22 recordings, and the moment arrives like a door opening, you press play.